Hello and welcome back to season 2 of Financial Aid Fridays. We are coming at you live from Orono, Maine on this gorgeous Monday afternoon. We hope everyone had a fantastic week and really a fantastic month since the last time we've spoken with you. My name is Jessica Hickernell.
And my name is Simon Ferland. Thank you all for joining us today. For those who have tuned in to our previous Financial Aid Friday episodes of the last 2 months, tonight's episode is going to be a little bit different. For one, it's Monday.
Whoa. What?
Yeah, I know. I looked at the calendar this morning, said Monday. Crazy. I wasn't expecting it. Additionally, this is our special edition episode, so designed to discuss all things graduate students should be thinking about as they enter their graduate program, or even some undergraduate seniors who are thinking ahead, thinking about potential graduate school programs for next year. So as such, we have a special guest who will be joining us here in just a moment.
And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. We're so excited to have you here. We have been hosting Financial Aid Fridays all summer, really, every Friday in June and July. And our series really covers all topics related to financial aid at the University of Maine, as well as information we think will be really useful to not only incoming students, but continuing students and as in relation to this episode specifically, graduate students. So definitely make sure that you're checking out all of our recorded episodes. In addition, this will be recorded and posted to our social media as well afterwards if you can't catch us live.
That's right. And now we want this to be an interactive experience. For those of you that are watching live, we want to hear from you. So if you have a question or comment throughout tonight's episode, please feel free to post your question or comment in the Facebook live stream, in the feed there, or if you're watching from YouTube, feel free to post a comment there. If for some reason you can't seem to post a comment in either location, I think YouTube, you need an account there, then you can also send us an email at the email address should be listed below, umfinaid@maine.edu, and we have staff members standing by waiting to feed us those questions live on air, so we'd love to tackle some of those.
Absolutely. Now, Simon, I think it's time to bring in our special guest. So joining us now from the graduate school is Jason. Welcome, Jason. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you just start us off, take a moment, tell us about yourself, tell our viewers what you do here at the University of Maine, and maybe some of the resources that the graduate school can offer both prospective and continuing students?
Absolutely. And thank you again both for having me. I'm very excited to be here to talk about the graduate school. Again, my name is Jason Aylmer. I'm a graduate student recruitment specialist at the University of Maine. For those of you who perhaps on campus have seen in Stoddard Hall down at the bottom floor is where the graduate school office is, and where I normally am. As you can see right now, I'm live from my house while we're all still working on our social distancing plans. As a side note, I am a UMaine alum. I graduated from UMaine a while ago, my undergrad program, and I'm currently a grad student now myself in the English program. So I'm here to kind of tackle things from both angles. So really, the big picture for the University of Maine Graduate School is, we have over 100 different programs, from master's degrees, PhDs, certificates. You can even do, which is what I started out as a non-degree student. You can take a couple classes, is this right for me? What's my track look like? So there's really something for everyone, and my job is helping people figure out what that is, and I really enjoy doing that, especially as someone who changed their major 3 times as an undergraduate. Had a hard time finding my own road. That's a thing. So that's kind of what I do in a nutshell.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Jason, for joining us here. We are very happy that you were able to join us and offering a different perspective here for tonight's episode, talking about different grad resources available to grad students and prospective grad students. So very excited to have you. So for the topics for tonight's episode, we're going to be splitting things into sort of three primary blocks. The first is going to be the actual graduate school application process, which we're going to, in just a moment, we're going to let Jason tell folks about that. The second will be about the financial aid process, how you apply for financial aid as a graduate student and what types of aid are available to you. And then the third section, well, that goes into those different types of funding available in a little more detail, not just for those of you that are familiar with the FAFSA process from your undergraduate career, funding options beyond that as well. So Jason, can you start things off by telling us a little bit about the application process, how students, who are thinking about applying, how they go about doing that?
Certainly. So first, most importantly, the application process is not horrible. It has actually been streamlined, and if you have all of your documents and paperwork and everything lined up, ready to go, it really is a 30 minutes or less kind of operation. So it has been transitioned to be super user-friendly. There is the option to pause and come back if you need to, but if you sit down and knock it all out at once, it really is 30 minutes or less. So we've worked really hard on making it a lot less onerous. Doesn't involve stone tablets or anything terrifying like that. It's all online. It's 21st century. So on our website, umaine.edu/graduate, which also our entire online website has been updated. We have some great folks working behind the scenes this summer to do some updates again to make things more user friendly. So when you go and you look at the application tab, when you go down, really, there's a beautiful picture. You can click on that and jump right into the application process. And big picture again, when you're looking to sign up, what you really want to do is make sure you have a number of those documents and things set up ahead of time. And in order to help with that, we have created a checklist, some bullet points on some things. Each program will require certain different things, whether it's references, essays, those types of things. So that's something you want to check with your program before you start applying, but there's some main things to look for in all of those that you're going to need for transcripts, for example. So it lets you know that, yes, for example, you can apply with unofficial transcripts. You don't have to have your official transcripts to start out with. Those aren't needed until after you've been accepted, for example. So when we take a look at some of those different bullet points and what do I need and those sorts of things, most of it really is pretty laid out, straightforward. Does my program require an essay? The website for the program will tell you how long it needs to be. Simple stuff like that you can work on ahead of time, and it makes it a lot less stressful when you sit down to do it. You can say, yes, I have my 5 supporting documents, upload them, bam, again, 30 minutes or less of completed application, and you're ready to roll.
Great. Jason, can you talk to us a little bit about deadlines in the application process? What kind of deadlines are there?
Certainly. So that's actually a really great question. So there's several different options. For most programs, when you go and you look at the website, there'll be usually one of two things. There'll be an actual specific hard deadline, or it will say rolling. So the rolling sometimes can throw people off because the programs kind of look at it two different ways. One is when your application deadline says rolling, it means they're accepting applications year round. They review them year round. They make decisions year round. Sometimes for rolling, it can also mean that, yes, they do accept applications year round, but they review them maybe quarterly. So you can follow up with myself and I'll check with the graduate coordinator to see specifically, what your time frame is for hearing back from the program for a decision. But usually rolling is you can apply anytime, and you just have to be sort of cognizant of when the next semester starts. For example, if you wanted to apply for this fall, even though the program's rolling, applying right now would probably be a little late. So bearing that in mind. And then secondly, there are a lot of them have a specific hard deadline. They usually start around December 1st, and then most of them have sort of a mid to late January deadline for next fall, for example, fall 2021. Some of them will say accepting applications until full, for example, and that just means we need to spend some time communicating with the graduate coordinator to see where they are capacity-wise and that sort of thing.
Great. I had one more question. So you mentioned that you work with undergraduate students who are doing their post-graduation planning and potentially looking at graduate school for an option. We are close to starting the academic year here, so we've got a whole batch of undergraduate seniors getting ready to start their final year. What are some things that seniors who are thinking about graduate school as a post-graduation option should have on their radar over the next couple months?
Certainly. So I would say specifically for our, undergrad students at UMaine, kind of three main things. Number one, really, you have a huge leg up in that you're already part of the UMaine family. A lot of times, when I talk to some students, they don't maybe necessarily realize, or it hasn't been made clear to them that sometimes the professors that they have at undergrad level also teach at, our faculty for the grad level, for example. So these professors that you have, created a rapport with, that have seen your work, they can kind of speak to who you are academically, who you are as a person, all that sort of good stuff. So work on those connections. The departments especially love, to see, they have somebody instead of just, a typical application, they have, somebody they maybe worked with for years that really gives them a good idea of you as a student, and you can really use that to your advantage. Secondly, I would say, for those folks that are looking to go into some sort of STEM field, for example, a lot of times for certain programs, lab experience is really important. And we have a number of different lab programs throughout campus. There's a group with acronym CUGR that can help get folks lab experience if they need it, those sorts of things. So again, sort of following up on that idea of staying connected and networking and those sorts of things. And then third, really is to connect with the grad school. At the end, we'll put up my information on how to get a hold of me. We can Zoom, we can connect by email, whatever works for you. But we want to focus on what are the deadlines? What does your program require? Perhaps you're interested in doing something that's slightly different than your undergrad program. Do you have to take any additional prereqs? Those sorts of things. So this is really a great time to start looking for fall 2021. And you can really kind of get an idea of what you'll need to do in order to have a successful application.
And Jess, if I may jump in here.
Yes, please.
This actually sort of connects back with something that you and I have mentioned in prior episodes, which is the importance of communication and keeping an open line of communication, especially for students. I myself, my undergrad, my degree was in theater, and now I am pursuing an MBA. So just because you completed one program, if you have an interest in another, communicating with the grad school, finding out if there are prerequisites that you would need to complete prior to applying into that particular program. I actually ended up taking a class as a non-degree, and it all connected and it all went very smoothly. So there are definitely options for students who are looking at a slightly different program than they may have been studying for their undergraduate degree.
Great. Jason, I have a couple more questions about the admissions process here. Application fees, is there a fee? What are the actual fees to apply? And then also confirmation deposits? What are the details on that piece of it?
Certainly. So the good news is if you're a University of Maine current student or an alum, then there is no application fee. It is waived. And if you are not, the application fee is $65. If you are not an alum, not a current student, and you're applying to multiple programs, similar field, maybe like biochemistry and then chemistry, there are some options around having that second application fee waived if you're interested in doing multiple applications. So again, going back to just connecting with me and kind of pointing in the right direction for that. Additionally, I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Like confirmation fees.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. So the good news is that there aren't any for on the grad level. What it looks like as far as international students, there is a financial form that you would fill out when you're coming here, depending on whether you have an assistantship and some other variables. There is a document, if you have any international undergrads that are listening in, that you would verify, that you have X amount of funds available to cover their school year and books and that sort of stuff, notarized, coordinated with your bank and that sort of stuff. But that aside, when you go ahead and apply and all that, there isn't the traditional sort of deposit that they do have in undergrad. So it's a big amount.
Great. Okay, one more question, I promise, and then we can move on to the finances piece of this. So standardized tests for graduates or students who are applying to graduate school, GREs, GMATs, what do the requirements look like? How are folks navigating that in the current environment that we're in with social distancing and all that, the virtual stuff? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely, yeah, that's a great question. So luckily, a lot of the programs have kind of taken a couple different approaches. Before we had the unfortunate pandemic situation that we're in right now, the GRE and GMAT, there were maybe 10 or 15 programs that had dropped that specific requirement, and it's for a number of different reasons. It really, those standardized tests, are used as sort of a barometer to figure out for departments, what your sort of academic prowess and your academic future might look like as a grad student. And for some of the programs, there are other things that they can use, work experience, that sort of stuff, lab experience, to fill in for that. So some programs are doing away with that. So I'd probably say it's at 10 to 15% range right now for programs that do not require a standardized test. Mm-hmm. Some of them had waived them over the summer. For example, the MBA program, their waivers ending, I believe, September 1st. They had waived for folks that were applying for this fall. They had waived the GMAT requirement, for example. That, programs are trying to be as helpful and responsible as possible, trying to balance that. As far as taking the test itself, a lot of the programs, the GRE, for example, had some at-home options that were available for international students that had to do an English language proficiency exam, for example. Some of those companies like IELTS and TOEFL, for example, were working on some at-home options as well for folks who were unable to go anywhere. And also a lot of the test centers, or all of them, were closed down for a period of time as well. So as we continue into the fall, they're still kind of surveying the landscape and figuring out how long some of these at-home options are going to be available and those sorts of things. Again, if you want to connect with me, I can iron that out and see what is currently available, for that, because it is changing rapidly. But the good news is that there are a lot of options for that sort of thing.
Great. Jason, so thank you so much for talking about all that admission stuff. That I think is very, very helpful, especially for incoming students who maybe aren't aware of the actual process. So now that we've got an idea of how to apply for admission, Simon, before I toss it over to you to talk about the actual financial aid application process for graduate students, I do want to note that this information not only applies to new applicants, but incoming and continuing graduate students for the fall 2020 semester. All the following financial aid information, how to apply, information about assistantships. This is helpful to you as well. So, tune in and listen to the whole episode because there could be some good nuggets of information that'll help you through this next academic year. So Simon, you want to start us off with that financial aid application process?
Absolutely. So the good news with graduate school financial aid and the application process for that is for most of you, you may already be aware of it, and it's the FAFSA. So you'll be filling out a FAFSA to initiate your application for federal financial aid as a graduate student. Now there are a few differences to keep in mind. The first is that graduate students are, from a financial aid perspective, considered independent students, and so the only information that you would be required to actually put on your FAFSA would be your own and possibly your spouse's for those where that applies. So you would not have to put any parent financial aid information as part of this particular process. Let's see here, and Well, Jess, do you want to go into?
Yeah, I think the other thing
loans?
that's
Yeah.
really important to note with this financial aid process, the FAFSA-based financial aid, so when you're submitting your FAFSA, really the only thing that a graduate level student is eligible for based on the FAFSA is federal direct unsubsidized loan. Now, Simon, we've talked about these federal loans a lot. So these are, remember, loans are funds that are required to be repaid after you're no longer enrolled. So either after you graduate or you're no longer taking classes. And these particular federal loans that graduate students are eligible for are also unsubsidized. Now, Simon, if you recall, that unsubsidized means that interest begins accruing immediately on these loans.
That's right.
But there are some other types of loans that are also available to graduate students that aren't necessarily directly associated with the filing of the FAFSA. Can you talk a little bit more about those options, Simon?
That's right. So another loan option that's available for grad students would be a Graduate Plus loan. Now that is sort of like a Parent Plus loan, but it's for you. So you would fill that out. An application for such a loan would be through studentaid.gov. So it's not directly associated with your FAFSA. There is an application process associated with it, and as such, it is a credit-based loan. So it is going to look at your actual credit history to determine whether or not you're actually approved for that particular type of loan.
Absolutely. And the other type of loan that is also available to students, which we have also talked about before, are alternative educational loans. Now, these are private loans through lenders or banks, and again, they're credit-based loans, so you actually have to apply through the lender or bank of your choice. And we have a really great alternative loan resource called Elm Select. It's Elm, E-L-M, like the tree, select.com. And you can actually search specifically for lenders that lend funds to graduate students. So definitely check that out if you're trying to figure out what kind of loan program to go with. So that's loans. Now to sort of switch gears and talk about another major source of funding that we see a lot of UMaine graduate students utilizing, and that is assistantships and fellowships. Now I'm going to toss this over to Jason first to get us started on this topic by telling us a little bit more about what an assistantship is, what a fellowship is, if there's a difference between the two, just to sort of get us our toes wet here on this topic.
Excellent. Yes. So we do have a lot of ships. So the keeping them all straight is important. So the main difference is the fellowship really only requires that you make satisfactory progress in your program. But the assistantship is usually or always some sort of work requirement, usually 20 hours per week for what's considered a quote unquote full-time assistantship. So again, they're both merit-based, but with a fellowship, you're getting a stipend, the taxes are not withheld, and there's no direct deposit, you just get a monthly check. The assistantship, again, is much more like work where you have taxes, you have your direct deposit, those sorts of things. And the assistantship oftentimes can take on a couple different roles, which we'll go into in a little bit. But it really is, a lot of times like applying for a job. And depending on how your program is set up, you may apply, get into grad school, and the assistantship is offered through the department. And sometimes you may apply to grad school and then apply, like you would for scholarships or anything else, separately for your fellowship and for your assistantship.
Excellent. And speaking of sort of applying for those, Jess, do you want to take us through where students can find some of those assistantships?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say there's three places I usually recommend students look for these assistantships. The first is CareerLink, and that is our online job database that is sort of utilized by the Office of Student Employment as well as the Career Center. And so many departments on campus that have open, available graduate assistantship positions, they will send that information to us to post on CareerLink. And the great thing about that is in those postings, it will give you a pretty good description of, what the job requirements are, what the position does, and how to apply. And actually, Simon, a lot of times you can apply directly through CareerLink for those positions.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also like to encourage students to reach out to departments directly to ask about available opportunities. I think and Jason, you kind of alluded to this a little bit in terms of being a part of the UMaine family, especially for those undergraduate seniors who have developed those relationships in the department that they're looking at continuing in, asking to see if there's assistantship positions available, either working with faculty or staff. Definitely don't be afraid to take the initiative and ask those questions for the opportunities. And then, Jason, we also like to, point people towards the graduate school. Do you guys have any resources over there that to help students find open positions?
Yes, and again, going back to the communication piece, there's a couple different options. We have worked with the Career Center. You mentioned the Career Link, which is the post, and we have on our website a list of what those different positions look like. Occasionally, if a student defers or something happens, there's sometimes some sort of last-minute assistantships that occasionally open up before the fall starts. So again, if you're looking to jump into one, definitely connect with myself and kind of point you in the right direction. Really, again, I don't want to overstate, but it is like applying for a job for a lot of times. We have, for example, 7 graduate assistants that work in our office. So they work 20 hours a week for their assistantship. Their tuition is waived, and then they receive a stipend to help cover living expenses. So it's a fantastic way to go to grad school and not only have your classes paid for, but also have a stipend. And they're doing fantastic work. In a lot of offices, financial aid, all over. We have graduate assistants that are doing really vital work and really interesting things too. Our folks do marketing, they make videos. It's fun. I think they really enjoy the stuff that they do. It's almost like taking another class, for example. You're really learning in that environment that you're working in. So it isn't just a job. It is really a really great sort of immersive academic experience as well.
Yeah, I will say that the GAs that we have here in the office, the experience that they have from working in our office is really widespread and can be applied in any number of career futures. So these are absolutely skills and techniques that they learn and take with them. So it's absolutely a wonderful experience. Jason, can you tell us? I mean, with the different grad assistantship options, are there different requirements? Let's say weekly number of hours. Is it varied? And if it is, where would folks learn about those, or be able to tell what the requirements are?
Certainly. So the main rule of thumb, most of the assistantships, so there's 3 sort of main varieties. As an overarching umbrella, they are often referred to as graduate assistantships, but really those refer to when, like for example, the graduate assistants that are working in our grad school office, they come from a number of different programs. They could be from the MBA, from global policy, from wherever. So it doesn't necessarily have to align exactly. We don't have we're not an academic unit, so they can come from wherever. So with that, we also have teaching assistantships. Those are focused on the department you're in. You teach an undergrad course for your work, or a research assistantship where you're in the lab. So those options allow folks a number of different sort of choices. And sometimes with the department, you may have the choice. Let's say for engineering, for example, do you want to work in the lab and be a research assistant? Would you prefer to be in the classroom and be a teaching assistant? So sometimes you have, there's some different choices depending on what program you go into. Also, occasionally, there are some departments where you might work in a related field, for example, where you might be, in global policy, but, because they have economics classes, you might be a teaching assistant in economics, for example. So there's all kinds of different ways to kind of mix and match what lines up and what is best for you and for the department at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I just want to take a moment to pause here, Simon and Jason. and just emphasize how great of a resource any kind of assistantship is for a graduate student in terms of funding a graduate education. As we mentioned, when you file the FAFSA, really you're looking at loan eligibility. So having tuition paid each semester or partial tuition paid each semester plus a monthly stipend can help you dramatically reduce the amount of loans that you would have to borrow each semester, which I always say the least amount of loans that you can come out of graduate with, you're just going to really be setting yourself up for success once you do graduate and move into the workforce. So I just wanted to take a moment and make sure folks understood the awesomeness, the potential awesomeness of assistantships. Okay, so now if you are currently an incoming or continuing student and you have been offered a graduate assistantship or you're continuing in a graduate assistantship for this upcoming year, it also, we're thinking it might be a little helpful for you to understand the actual process, timeline as to when that the tuition waiver or partial tuition waiver is going to be applied to your student account, and when you're going to be receiving your stipend. So Simon, can you start us off talking a little bit about this?
Absolutely. So what happens effectively is when a student is offered their graduate assistantship, the hiring supervisor will actually complete and send along an appointment form, which is then sent over to the graduate school for processing. Now, once that is processed, the bursar's office is then notified, and they're the ones that actually post the tuition waiver and the insurance benefit for the ones that where that's applicable to your student account. And then lastly, once that's posted, then our office will actually post the information as part of your financial aid award, so that way it's acknowledged there as well.
And I do want to just note that when we receive notification that you're receiving an assistantship, like Simon said, we actually put that the amount of the assistantship, the tuition waiver on your financial aid award, because we do have to consider that as financial assistance you're receiving. So just be aware that if you have filed a FAFSA and you were offered your full direct loan eligibility, when we post that tuition waiver to your financial aid award, it may decrease the total amount of loan that you're eligible for, which, like I just said, is a good thing because that's less loans that you'll have to take out. So just be aware of that you may see some changes to that loan eligibility when we do post the assistantship to your financial aid award.
That's a great point. And one other note about these, so the stipend, so that's processed through the payroll office. And GAs that are set up to receive their monthly stipend, it's usually on the last business day of the month. You'll want to make sure that you take advantage of establishing direct deposit, and that way it's deposited directly into your account at that point. So definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and then just one last note on the payroll piece of it for GAs, whether you're a new GA or you've never worked on campus before, in order to complete the processing of that payroll information so you can get that monthly stipend, it's going to be very important that as soon as you get to campus and you finish whatever testing or quarantining you need to do, that you come to visit the Office of Student Employment to complete the required federal new hire paperwork. This is specifically called the federal I-9 form. So anytime you start a new job or anything like that, you have to complete this federal I-9 form. And so just be aware that when you come to Wingate Hall, to the Student Employment Office, you're going to want to make sure that you bring some pretty specific documentation with you to complete the form. And again, it's a federal form, so the rules are very specific as to what kind of documentation we can accept. So it could be things like, let's say you've got a photo ID, an unexpired photo ID, so either a main card or an unexpired driver's license. If you have that, then you can also bring either an original birth certificate or your original Social Security card. Or if you have an unexpired passport, you can bring that in. It does have to be the original document. And again, where it is a federal form, they are very specific at it has to be the original document. Now, I will note for international students, this new hire paperwork is a little bit lengthier. There are some additional documents that we do need from you. I would highly recommend checking out the UMaine Student Employment website. They go over all the requirements for mandatory paperwork, new hire paperwork for international students, and what kind of documentation you'll need to bring to the office with you in order to complete the form.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so before we switch gears into our questions and answer section here, Jason, do you have any additional information or tips that you would like to highlight for our viewers?
Sure, just two last things. Again, we're going to go over how to book an appointment virtually with myself, but
Yes.
Going back to that connection piece, really part of my role is connecting folks with grad coordinators. Oftentimes, the department that you're going to apply to requires that you set up a faculty advisor ahead of time, even before you apply. So again, going back to that connection piece is super important, and just to make sure that we have really made an honest effort at getting you into connected to somebody in the department who can talk to you about what's available and all the different assistantship choices and those sorts of things. So it can sometimes be daunting. I know some people do not like talking and introducing themselves, doing all those sorts of things. But this is so important to reach out and to send that initial email introducing yourself. I'm happy to walk you through that and talk about that sort of stuff. So just bearing that in mind, making sure before you go to apply, what do I need to do as far as connecting with the department. And then the second thing is we have, we're about to start our fall 2020 semester. Sometimes folks, take a look, usually it's every fall, we have a new program. We do have a spring, we have a spring semester, and people do start sort of off cycle and those sorts of things. Especially now where, scheduling might be a little different, or you're graduating at a different time or what have you. Programs are really flexible. They really want to find people who are passionate, about whatever studying, those sorts of things. So don't forget about spring 2021 or spring 2022 or whatever. There's technically a summer term as well. So whatever kind of works with your schedule. Can you take time off? You want to jump right in? Let me know. So there's something for everyone.
Fantastic. Okay, so Simon, I think we are ready to jump into a little bit of some question and answer time.
Let's take a look.
All right. You want to start us off with our first question?
Sure. So it looks like the first question we have here: how do I pay the application fee? Jason, you want to tell us about that?
Certainly. So if you do have to have an application fee, then it's the very last thing that second to last thing you will do when you apply. After you reviewed everything, there's an option to put in your credit card or bank details, and you submit that. And once your payment is verified, the very last thing you'll do, which occasionally gets missed, and we have some emails to go out to help remind folks, you do have to hit submit after you do your payment. There's a second submit to send us your application, so it's not sitting out there in la la land. So and it's through the application portal. Occasionally, for whatever reason, if you're having trouble or something happens, let me know. There is another payment system that we occasionally use. It's usually for international students who have to pay through a different method. But for most everybody, 99% of the time, you can play right through the portal and then submit your application.
Fantastic. Jason, it looks like we have a follow-up question to the application fee piece. So can the application fee, if a student's required to pay it, be waived?
So there's two options. There's a couple, and on our website, there's a couple different scholarships, and I think one or two fellowships that we have listed. And I know the McNair scholarship does. I think one of the other ones might waive the application fee for you. So there's some specific scholarship programs that include covering your application fee, for example. I think the IRT scholarship program does as well. Any IRT scholars, and I can go over what all those sorts of things mean. But there are some of those programs that pay for that. And then also, again, going back to connecting with your department that you're applying to, Occasionally departments will specifically, if they have funds for whatever, may have a period where they waive all application fees or application fees for certain scenarios. So we can also check with your department as well.
Perfect. All right, next question that we have, a viewer is asking about applying for more than one program. And I think that we can actually split this into sort of two different sections. One being just, if you wanted to apply to multiple programs and then pick one. And then I'd be curious, Jason, if you could tell us about dual programs and just studying two programs simultaneously as well.
Certainly, yeah, no, that's a great question. So there's no detriment, I guess is the question I get a lot of times. If I'm interested in, chemistry and the MBA program, can I apply to both? Will they know, et cetera, et cetera? And you can apply to multiple. We've had some people that have applied up to 5 or 6 different programs. So you can definitely do that. And again, as I mentioned, if they are usually similar programs, under the same sort of academic college, that's another, like I mentioned, another time we might be able to waive that second application fee, like if you're interested in chemistry and biochemistry, for example. So yes, you can definitely apply to multiple programs. We do not tell them that you are, interested in more than one program. That again, and this might be a good way to a good quick side note. When the application comes in, it comes to the grad school. We make sure that you have all of your parts and pieces and documents and everything's in there, and then we send it off to the department specifically to review. Then it comes back to the grad school for a final review from our VP, Scott Delcourt. So we do not make the initial decision. It's not centralized admissions like the undergrad programs. That is a little different to note, and another reason why it's so important to be communicating with the grad programs. And then to answer the question about the dual program. So for example, the MBA program and global policy has a dual program, and you would apply to those separately. Again, your second application fee would be waived, and then you would have to get into both of those programs. And then in that case, we would obviously let the respective programs know that you're applying to the other and you want to do the dual program. We do get the question sometimes, let's say I've started my MBA program and I realize, I do want to do the dual program, for example. We can always find out, we can always ask. I don't think they have a specific, obviously if it's, a semester before your graduation, that might be a little tricky. It's just a matter of how much more time you want to add on to your academic journey, but the dual programs are fantastic. You end up with 2 degrees, and it is a bit different than folks who maybe have double majored as an undergrad, and there's some different nuances, and again, depending on, if they're in the same college or not. Some of them have specific, we have several dual degree options like the global policy and main MBA program. And then some, we have what is called interdisciplinary programs. So we have an interdisciplinary master's degree and an interdisciplinary PhD program. They've actually been around a while. I think both of them, I want to say, have been around since the 70s. So it's something that if you don't find sort of a choose your own adventure of something that's already been created, a pathway for you academically. Let's say you want to study history and music, for example. We can figure out if we can join those together for you.
Very cool. So another question here related to the application process and programs. What if a student, after they have applied for admission, they change their mind on the program that they want to apply to, or they change their mind on the semester that they want to start? What would you recommend for those students?
Certainly. So for the semester one, there's you can always defer. It's something we would work out with your advisor and the department and that sort of thing. Especially right now, for example, there's definitely options to defer. We can always also see, if it's something where you can't physically be here, if you don't want to defer, but start taking online classes. Some programs are what are called blended or hybrid, where there's an online and an on-campus component, so you might be able to do some of each. So that's definitely an option as well. But what was the first part of the question again?
If a student changes their mind about the program that they've been, I guess, admitted into.
Yes. So that does happen, obviously. Very, very rarely, but it's not necessarily a bad thing, and it's good to figure out before you're a year and a half in. The best, there isn't necessarily a specific pathway forward on how to address that, but it would be communicating with myself and your coordinator and figuring something out. Most of the time, it leads simply to a second application for what you want to do. Occasionally, if it's sort of in-house in the same college or what have you, it might be something that you can change in Main Street or something like that. But the majority of the time, it would require a second application, and then just kind of figuring out what does make sense and why do you want to make that transition.
Great, thank you for that. It looks like our next question, I'm currently enrolled at a University of Maine System campus. What transcripts are required for my application? Jason?
The good news is you don't have to send any if you're in the UMaine System.
That's good
news. We go and find them. We have little sniffer dogs. No, just kidding. It's something that we can request academically for you, so you don't have to go and track those down. We can put in a request to get that taken care of.
Great. Looks like we have another question here. Are letters of recommendation required in the application process?
For a lot of programs, they are. A couple of them do not, but most of them do. And so what you'll want to do when you go in to fill out your application, it's a good thing to note, if you're not finishing your application right away, as soon as you put in email address and then you save your application or you go on to the next step, it's going to send those folks out a invitation to go ahead and submit your letter of recommendation. And there's a link in the email that they get that sends it directly back to the grad school. It gets attached to your application. So just be sure when you're doing it that you ask them before you put their email address in, because it's an instantaneous request. And you just obviously make sure you give them a heads up.
Excellent. All right, and our next question, it looks like it's it's one that prior to working in financial aid, I worked in admissions, and it's certainly a question for undergraduates that I heard frequently. And it's when can folks expect a decision about their application? What do you think, Jason?
So it's kind of a cop out, but it is department by department. Sure. And it's something that we can definitely find out and get you most of them follow a typical pattern each year, so we can kind of figure out where in the cycle that happens. A lot of them are in the March to April, so you apply the program, let's say is January 15th deadline, you'll usually know by either April, sometime in April, April 1st, April 2nd, what have you. They usually don't go much beyond that. So it's a month or two of percolation and waiting. For those that have the traditional deadline. Going back to the question about rolling, you don't that one you wouldn't specifically know. We'd have to check and see what their time frame is for reviewing applications. Some of them have a really fast turnaround time, like in a matter of weeks, and some of them it's a little bit longer if they review quarterly. I will also go back and amend my statement I talked about the transcripts earlier. Which is actually a really good thing to note in the difference, again, going between, and I always think about official transcripts because that's what we need for someone to start classes and those sorts of things. The unofficial transcripts, again, is what a department would use to review your application and get you a decision. So in that case, if you are, let's say, a University of Maine Farmington student, if you attach you can easily on Main Street, access your unofficial transcript and attach that. That does make the process a bit faster. They'll have that unofficial record that they can look for. The official transcripts is, usually what we would go and pull and take care of, so you wouldn't have to, sometimes you go to a different school, you have to have a fee to have your transcript released and all that. Mm-hmm. So that, you wouldn't have to worry about. But when you're submitting your application, it is a good idea if you can to download real quick a copy of your unofficial transcript. that way, as soon as you submit it, that it's there. They can view it, and then we can worry about the later on.
Great. All right. Okay, so it looks like we have a financial aid question here. As a new graduate student, will I get an official financial aid award letter if I file the FAFSA? Simon, can you start us off on that one?
Sure. So graduate students, once they file a FAFSA, they're actually notified through their Main Street account. And now, Jess, it's been a while since I've looked at this. For students that are not an undergraduate in at UMaine, do they get a physical letter? I can't recall.
Yeah, so graduate students do not get physical award letters. So you will get an email notification that you have been awarded your loan eligibility based on your FAFSA information, and then you can view that right through Main Street. And as a matter of fact, right through Main Street is where you're going to, if you plan on accepting any of those direct loans, you'll do that right through Main Street. Now, graduate students who have been offered an assistantship, you will receive an actual appointment letter for that assistantship. And that appointment letter does have some really key information about the amount of your monthly stipend, what percentage of the tuition the waiver is covering, and other important information like that. So graduate students would get an actual letter for that appointment letter if they have an assistantship. As for any FAFSA-based financial aid eligibility, no physical letter will they be receiving.
Excellent. All right. And the next question we have here: how do I find out about assistantships? Now we've mentioned some of the resources, CareerLink and reaching out to departments. But is there anything that we might have missed, Jason, or even just perhaps this could be also after applying for them, finding out? What do you think?
Yeah, so on our website, we are continuing to update and figure out the best way to get that information out as soon as possible. There doesn't yet exist a perfect database that lists them all. And part of the reason is that there's some very different funding streams on where those funds come from for the assistantships, which is why if we happen to have any international students tuning in, to double check on there, we've been trying to get the departments to clarify and verify for their assistantships. Sometimes they are federally funded assistantships where you have to file the FAFSA, be a citizen, those sorts of things in order to qualify. So some of those assistantships are not open to international students. We do have a number of international students who do have assistantships, but just when you're looking to make sure that you qualify and you're in the right category. Again, in connecting with the department that you're applying to, the grad coordinator will oftentimes know, maybe that, they have a new scholarship or a new grant that has come into the department and they're able to have an extra assistantship for the fall. They didn't realize until July or something. So we want to stay as up to date as possible with that information and continue to connect with the department.
Yeah, and Jason, you mentioned that there are some assistantships out there that have some specific criteria in terms of eligibility, specifically related to having filed a FAFSA and being eligible for federal funds. So those are called federal work study graduate assistantships. There are a limited amount of those on campus. But if you come across one either in a job posting or you're talking with a department that's saying that they have federal work study GAs available, definitely contact our office, the Office of Student Financial Aid, to see if you would be eligible for that federal work study piece of the assistantship. So if you have a question as to whether you'd be eligible for that particular position, please contact us. We can walk you through the process to help you figure out if you can actually apply for it or not. Okay, so looks like we have another question here. What are the graduate student housing options at UMaine? Jason, can you take that one for us?
Certainly. So we have a couple different choices. Again, I mentioned Starter Hall, where our office is located down on the bottom floor. I don't like to use the term basement, but it is technically a point. Actually, when I went there, was a dining hall back in the 90s when I was an undergrad. But anyway, yes, in the bottom of Starter Hall, where we are, the floors all above it are all residential, except now the Office of International Programs, I believe, is on the third floor. So they have a little suite off to themselves. But that is the main graduate housing. There are some undergrads there. It's going to look a little different this fall because of the entire housing situation, but traditionally, usually I think it was a 21 plus for the undergrad students. That's the primary focus for grad students. There's both individual and roommate options. I think they had one or two like suites. They have, a couple, they have a professor in residence program, so they try to get, a professor to be there. They have a sort of a typical RA situation. They have more, they also have someone that operates sort of like an RA there as well. We also have some off-campus, almost on campus, we'll call it, family housing. It's right down the road. We have a little park area that there's a number of different options for folks to bring their family, 2 and 3 bedroom choices, apartment style type of thing. So there is something for everybody. And then the Office of Student Housing also has a number of contacts for folks who want to look at living in the community in general and how do I find off-campus housing and those sorts of things. And they're happy to kind of in direction with that as well.
Fantastic. Okay, Jason, Simon, I think we're coming to the end of our episode here. So before we actually wrap up tonight, I do want to get Jason's information up on the screen here. Jason, can you talk a little bit about how folks can get in contact with you? And also any last words of advice, whether it's just the admissions process, going to grad school, anything like that, or advice for coming to UMaine?
Certainly, yeah. So for the contact information, the recruitment team is myself and my director, Fiona Libby. We have the Zoom option where you can book an appointment with us. We'd love to hear from you. My email address, those are the 2 best ways to get a hold of myself at the moment. And like I said, we are more than happy to, set up a time to do a little academic, sort of career counseling kind of thing. Like we can loop in somebody from the Career Center. We have a whole bunch of different options. So definitely would love to hear from you and try to figure out what sort of makes sense. And I think, again, the biggest thing going back to sort of, tips and tricks and, what is it applying to grad school, it really comes down to, what is that right fit for you? What do you want to end up doing, because there are so many options here at UMaine. If you want to do something specific like becoming a lawyer, we can get you connected with folks down in southern Maine. Even if it's not something that's specifically on campus, there are so many options with the University of Maine, and so many really neat programs that sometimes fly under the radar. Like we have acronyms, love acronyms, GSBSE, our biomedical science program. They have a PhD program where they do rotations at all these 5 major labs throughout Maine, like Jackson Labs, CCRI, all NCCRI, all kinds of cool stuff. So whatever you're interested in, I promise you we have something for you. And I just, want to hear from you. And as we talked about with the assistantship program, for a lot of folks, we have over 600 people that are doing various different types of assistantships. You not only are your classes paid for, your tuition's waived, but you get paid to go to grad school. You get, the stipends start a little under $16,000 and then go up from there depending what program you're in and all that stuff. So it's something that you can afford, and we really just want to find the right fit for you.
Fantastic. Well, Jason, thank you so much for being here. I think this was a really fantastic conversation about UMaine Graduate School. And yes, thank you so much for being here and joining us. Simon, I believe we have come to the end of our very first episode of season 2, and I think it was a success.
I do too. I think it went very well, and I also wanted to echo what Jessica just said. Thank you, Jason. We absolutely appreciate you joining us here and providing us with all of this information.
So before we say goodbye, I am just going to plug our website. Make sure you visit our UMaine Financial Aid website. We have got the dates of our Financial Aid Friday episodes that we are doing through the fall semester, once a month through the fall, posted there. So mark your calendars. Free up your Friday evenings because we will be coming at you live once a month on Friday at 6 p.m. So we are so excited that the semester is about to begin here, and we hope everyone has a fantastic week. Goodbye.
Good night, everyone.